Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Other Minds and Hands. And this is episode number 80. And today, Maggie and I continue to try to swim upstream against all of the new content that is being released in preparation for season 2 of The Rings of Power, which is now only like 2 weeks away.
2 weeks away?
Basically, yeah. So this is getting fun and exciting. Of course, it's being 2 weeks away means that we are also 2 weeks away from Rings and Realms. Yeah. We've been doing.
Honestly, I'm a little more excited about. Not gonna lie.
yeah.
God, it's fun.
Agreed. Yeah, the Rings of, especially in the last few weeks, as we've been doing a lot of planning, the Rings and Realms episode drops have become like the mere wireframe around which like everything else is being built.
The whole world exists. Yeah.
Exactly.
We now have like a shared calendar between, I don't know, 7 of us that are putting this together, and the Kickstarter is still going on if you guys are interested in it. But this shared calendar and a like executive, or what do you call it, exclusive development Reddit, Discord.
Yeah, the Discord. Yeah.
Pulling all this stuff together and having all these ideas going around and starting to plug that into a structure, and oh god, we're having fun.
yeah no, it's gonna be the first. So working through the schedule has confirmed what we've always known, that first week is going to be completely insane. Like it's because we're basically going to be trying to produce we are going to be producing 3 entire episodes in a week. And in the middle of that, I'm going to be in Seattle for Cascade Moot. So, and by the way, Maggie, I just discovered one of the folks who's coming to Cascade Moot is gonna host a watch party at his house on the Friday night before. So fun. we're gonna have like a group like cookout and watch party at the house of one of the guests and stuff. It's gonna be cool.
Oh, fun! Well, if there's any watch along, let me know.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. But anyway, it's gonna be
awesome.
It's going to be a great time. I'm really excited to kind of immerse ourselves again. And the more we've been planning through, our episodes and how we want to structure them and all the things that we're hoping to kind of improve on from last season, just with our own production and how can we make what we do better. It's just been really fun to think about doing this again. So
definitely, getting really excited about it. And of course I'm excited for Rings of Power, but it's like we've always said from the beginning, like it doesn't really matter to me if Rings of Power is good or bad. Like the analysis we're doing along with it is just so much fun. So it's just really exciting to have all this new content and all these new opportunities to talk about things. And now that we've got this lovely little community too, like it's always fun for you and me. It's always fun in Other Minds and Hands and the people that we bring on to this. But coming into the studio and setting up these virtual backgrounds, and now we've got Jordan Rennell's coming to join us to do the music, who you guys know from
music and audio and
Soundscape. It's like so excited to bring him into it, and hearing his ideas come into this discussion. It's just everybody's getting excited and talking about the opening sequence is going to be different this season and how they built that, and they all geeked out about that, and they just really enjoyed creating this thing. And when you bring geeks together and give them really good equipment, it's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. No, and as you say, I mean, it really is. I've had a hard time making people like understand or believe me when I've said this. I remember people saying last time. You're investing all this time in doing Rings of Power stuff, but like, what if the show is really bad? And I'm like, what difference does that make?
Yeah, right? Then it'll be really bad, and we'll have fun talking about why it's bad.
Exactly. Then there's so much to talk about in explaining what makes a bad adaptation a bad adaptation. Like that's, I mean, obviously that's not the kind of fun we would hope to have, right? It's way more fun to talk about like, why is this epically wonderful? Talking about success is always more fun than talking about failure, but like the idea that it would be bad to talk about or not worth discussing if you don't like it. And this is why, to me, the question of do you like it or do you not like it has never even felt like a relevant question. If it's something I dislike, it makes it less fun to talk about, for sure. So yeah, it's a better experience if I actually enjoy it. But the thing I've said about the Rings of Power from the beginning, I think what I would have the hardest time with, the kind of adaptation I would most struggle talking about is just a shoddy slipshod adaptation. Like, where, like, an adaptation that gives you the impression that they're just kind of mailing it in, basically.
Right. Or they're trying to capture a quick buck and not really thinking about it. Like,
yeah, I mean, and those are all things like, that's like, it's crit fic to even draw those conclusions. But again, just like those kinds of things, right? The kinds of productions that make you suspect that stuff or think about those things. When it just feels like there's little effort being put in. But whatever you say or whatever you like or dislike about the Rings of Power, from the very beginning, it's been clear that there's been a lot of thought and a lot of energy and a lot of passion being put into not just the show, but into its connection with Tolkien. And I am loving talking about it. However it ends up being, yeah, Edith says, like the Zimmerman script. Yeah, exactly. The Zimmerman script, which of course Tolkien famously commented on in his letters, the film that was mercifully not made. Yes, that would have been. But honestly, Edith, there's plenty to talk about. Even if that movie did get made, if the Zimmerman film did get made, or even worse, if the Boorman movie that he wanted to make on The Lord of the Rings, which a lot of people don't even realize, that John Boorman had this whole script written for a Lord of the Rings adaptation, which when that got turned down, he did Excalibur instead, basically. But anyway, like, whatever. That would have been horrible. However,
that was the 70s, right?
Yeah, like right around 80, somewhere late 70s. Like, yeah, right around 1980, give or take. Right.
Right.
I don't remember the date of it exactly, but anyway, yeah. Phil says the Boorman script makes Lord of the Rings look scholarly and sober. Yeah. If I remember correctly, he has Frodo and Galadriel have a sexual encounter.
Cool.
But
fine.
But anyway, point is, even with something like that, there's stuff to talk about, right? I mean, there's still
agreed.
There's still
be
things to discuss.
Fodder. I'm glad that it's one of those things where, like, I'm kind of glad that doesn't exist in the world, just because I'd be.
I am too.
What a shame, you know.
I am too.
Some people,
yeah,
like with some of these adaptations, like if that's some people's only exposure to that story, you're like, what a shame that's the best that you could come up with, and that's the way you decided to use those resources. But we would still have fun talking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the Russian adaptation, exactly.
Yes, David Pertle is assuring me that I do in fact remember correctly about the Boorman script. Yes, exactly. Anyway, so
focusing.
Yeah, focusing. Anyway, so we should just mention again, you mentioned it in passing, the Kickstarter for Rings and Realms is still going on. Things are going really, really well with that. Again, we're going to bring in Jordan Rennells to do audio with us. And he's doing, like, we're doing whole, like, environmental audio. It's going to be awesome. Like, what Jordan adds is such an immersive dimension to the whole thing. I'm excited to see what that can bring to Rings and Realms. I never even thought of the idea of, like, what if we had a complicated soundtrack to go, like, the idea of delivering scholarly analysis with, like, a score in the background is, like, kind of amazing, right? Like, just the whole idea of having an entire soundtrack to a scholarly production is like a concept I find purely delightful, right? In prospect, I think is going to be really fun to see. And then there's going to be, and then of course we've been able to partner. We'll be able to partner with Nerd of the Rings. Matt will be able to join us for the retrospective episode. We're going to that's going to be a big thing. It might end up being a retrospective series if we end up getting multiple episodes worth of content out of that day, that epic day of shooting. So, and there's going to be more. We're working on other special guests as well, which we'll be announcing soon. Yeah, we are on a good pace to make our funding goal for Kickstarter, and again, assuming everything continues on the trajectory that it's been, and we meet our goal, we're going to be able to do this and a bunch of other things. Really excited to be able to bring in more crew to be able to help out both in pre and post production. It's going to make things much better. So.
But we do need to meet that goal. So if you're feeling enthused, come on and help us meet that goal. Because we can't bring Matt out unless we meet this goal. So
exactly.
Game on.
Yeah. That's there's no money for that without the Kickstarter. So, yes, we without the Kickstarter, we're back to our budget of 0, which is what we shot on last time.
Which will still be great, but it's going to be a little different than what we can do if we hit this. So. Exactly.
Awesome. So thanks to everybody who has contributed so far. That has just been delightful to see, and we look forward to the home stretch of that here over the course of the next couple weeks. All right. So
we've got a fair bit here, don't we, today?
Yeah. So there are 2 things that we want to look at today. First, we have the BTS video that we didn't get to last time. We talked about the trailer, but we didn't get to the BTS video. These BTS videos are really meaty. So I want to, and in these, well, never mind. We'll talk about it after that. I want to talk about the song that was released, the last ballad of Damrod, the soundtrack song that was dropped just recently. And I'll also admit I haven't got a chance to listen to it yet. So I'm going to listen to it live with you guys, and then we can talk about it. I've heard some things, but I'm really excited. I'm really excited to listen to it. And then if we get time, there was also a BTS featurette that was released about the song. So we can watch that also if we have the time. But okay, all right. Let's watch the BTS video, the most recent BTS video here first, and then we'll talk that through.
I think the character has changed simply because the circumstances have changed.
What is this place?
This sense of creeping dread, this idea that this thing is blooming. The shadow is going ever greater and ever closer.
Now,
first of all, can I just pause for a second to say I love how they overlay things there, right? The visual that they were showing is the elves and the Barrow Wights, right? Like the beginning of that scene. But the words that he's saying sound like he's referring to Sauron and the rise of Sauron, right? And then we see that it's actually, and I'm blanking on his name, the guy who plays Kemen from Numenor, right? So like all 3 things, like the Galadriel, Elrond, Barrow Wight incident, the rise of the shadow of Sauron, and like what's going on at Numenor all get really, I think, interestingly layered into that one little say. I thought that was very interestingly done.
And I think it's kind of worth, like, this is probably a good opportunity to say this. Like, I think, this isn't me knowing, I would think that this is a different team putting together this featurette than puts together the trailers.
Yeah.
So trailers, I would have said, like, oh, they just did that for dramatic effect and it worked with the pacing and whatever visuals they wanted to represent. If it's a featurette and they're showing something, there's a purpose to that layering that's quite revealing. So it does feel a little bit more impactful of like what they're showing us while what we're listening to, while actually alluding to something totally different. That's a cool way to kind of bring us a lot of information in the same 6 seconds.
Right. And suggest the kind of the way in which all of these different plot lines and concepts in the show are all kind of going in a similar direction and doing a similar kind of thing. Okay, anyway, sorry. Continue.
And 2, this is the season where we're bringing in more creatures.
Prepare yourselves.
Okay, here we go, guys. Loads of energy, we're set. Background. Be as scary as you possibly can. Here we go.
These days are days where there's no question you're working on Lord of the Rings.
Right as you're coming into that final thing, that would be a great place to have you're out of control.
Trees were a symbol of nature itself, and a symbol of good.
What's going on here?
Can I say?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, personally, my favorite, the Ents.
The actors always do that. Can I say?
They're like 27 feet tall at least.
There's the scale of this production, but then there's the scale of Tolkien's imagination. Everyone in all of the world is swirling around with their own different journeys.
The sea trial involves throwing someone into the sea and seeing if they survive with the sea worm.
If they survive, they're innocent.
It's a lovely day for a swim.
Pause for a second. Can we talk about that? That's one of the biggest, meatiest plot drops that happens in this video. So let's just pause for a second and talk about that before we move on. Right?
The worm.
The worm. Yeah, the whole Numenorean thing. Like, so they've provided for us the entire narrative explanation of what was started with a still that was released, right? Of what
monster.
turns out to be Muriel floating in front of the sea monster, right? So the idea of a trial of this kind, Eric, it's exactly like
That's
a witch trial.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Eric. Yeah, I'm like, witch trial, anyone? Yeah.
That is precisely the model here. What it literally is, like the category, the medieval category for these things is a trial by ordeal. It's like a trial by combat. The concept is similar to a trial by combat, but a trial by ordeal is exactly the same. That's the whole, if you drown, the whole point of like throwing witches into lakes and things like it's a trial by ordeal. So the story that we've been able to piece together is that Muriel is going to come home and look to be crowned as the reigning monarch, as the reigning queen of Numenor, and instead is going to end up on trial, is going to end up undergoing the sea trial.
You don't think this is part of her coming to power? Like you have to do this in order to be?
I don't think so.
I wouldn't think so, but it wasn't something I was sure about.
No, my sense of it, just based on, I'm focused in particular of the way that that Tristan Farazan was just saying. You use the word innocent, right? It's clearly like an actual trial, like to determine your innocence or guilt about something. So that I think is not just part of a some kind of ceremonial ritual, or even a ceremonial, like to have some sort of trial, some sort of ordeal like that as part of a rite of passage, right, to become king or something. That kind of thing is conceivable, like it's imaginable that could happen, but I don't think so. Yes, the sea worm trial is a pure invention, absolutely. As almost everything in Numenor has to be. I mean, we know a handful of things about Numenor. We know some things about their culture. We know about the dancing bears, but it's not. There's little. There are a lot of gaps that need to be filled in. So anyway, it's interesting. Diomedes says that Numenor's justice system might be backsliding. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it is my suspicion. This is just a suspicion, mind. Remember that we saw in season 1 a statue Down in the prison area, right, a statue which I think is almost certainly meant to be Uinen, the Maya of the seas and shorelines. She is the one of the Maiar who is most sacred to the Numenoreans, right? Who kept the Numenoreans under her watch and protection, right? The idea that a culture like that would develop a tradition to say, like, basically, if Uinen protects you, you're good. If Uinen doesn't protect you, you're not. Like, basically, like, we're going to leave it to her to figure out. That was the whole concept of trials by combat and trials by ordeal, by the way, is basically like, let's let God decide. We're not going to decide. We're going to leave God to decide this. And by the way, this is why, this is a little side note, but just little public service side note. This is why the medieval church soundly condemned both of those things. It was against church policy to do either a trial by combat or a trial by ordeal. They were not, they happened, but they were not sanctioned by the church on the principle of thou shalt not test the Lord thy God. Like, to put God on the spot and say we're going to force God to intervene in order to give us his judgment is not the right way to act towards God, the church said. So anyway, I just wanted to point out that even in the Middle Ages, these were sketchy practices and viewed to be sketchy practices. That doesn't stop a lot of medieval stories from including them. They did happen, in truth, and medieval stories love them. Like, medieval writers love trials by combat. They didn't happen. They were illegal. According to the church, they were illegal, but that doesn't stop them from being loved by medieval storytellers. Anyway, I am fascinated by the fact that they are including that sort of thing, a trial by ordeal, as part of the sort of Numenorean system there.
It feels very fitting to things that I'd be familiar with in most storytelling anyway, right? I mean, it's the challenges, the gauntlet laid before you, the rising action, all that kind of stuff. So of course you'd have to overcome some hurdle, but it does seem very on the nose of medieval myth to include it to be something like this and to allude it to a witch trial as a reigning queen. Whether they meant to do that or we just can easily draw that connection because of our knowledge of witch trials, that's still quite revealing too. Like, how are you branding this woman? Because it sure looks like you're branding her with you crazy and she's the sane one. So that helps kind of set her up in our eyes as like, she's the one that's being falsely tried here. We're going to support her a bit more. It's a good way to get your audience kind of behind her in that sense.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, Sarah, I agree with you that it fits in with the "C is always right" mantra. Yeah, exactly. And I think what they were implying with that and what they were, and what they seem to be leaning into even further, we are seeing a society that is already degrading, right? If you're chucking people in the river or in the ocean and saying, let's let Uinen sort it out, you've left the path of wisdom already, right? And the sea is always right as a really clumsy maxim that can be applied and manipulated in lots of different ways, again, shows a people that are leaving the path of wisdom as well. So I am more and more convinced that that's what they are sort of setting up and trying to show, that this is, we are meeting Numenor when it is already in decline, and there's some pretty clear evidence of its decline. No, Sarah, I think that's exactly right. Alan, I do believe that what we're seeing, that this is sort of the mechanism for the coup by Pharazôn. I'll be interested to see, does this happen a lot Like, do people get chucked off, the beach into the ocean to see if the sea worm will eat them frequently? Or is this Pharazôn like invoking an archaic thing manipulatively in order to, like that? I could see that going either way. I think that would be interesting to see. Anyway, yeah, and Eric, we don't know which shoreline, east or west. I would guess east, since West Numenor has been associated with the faithful, and this does not seem to be a faithful ritual. But yeah, it's the sea worm. It didn't look much like this, but if I can just go back for a second to that shot, I can't really.
Lovely day for a swim.
Yeah, that shot.
That.
I didn't see all the tentacles and stuff when we saw the dragon in season 1 when it attacked the raft. But I'm assuming that that's the same creature here.
No, I hadn't put that together, but I don't see why not.
I assume it would be, and that that also it's the same creature that was in the tapestry that we saw in Numenor last time. So anyway, yeah,
I wonder what myth they're going to put around that swimming hole. Like, how are they so confident that the worm comes there?
Yeah.
Curious.
Don't know. Yeah. So one thing I would point out, notice how when this image, which I have, which is almost exactly the still that was released, way back when this was released, there were all kinds of, doubts and speculations about this. Remember, we were talking about the Watcher in the water. Is this, where is this? Is this in the ocean? This could have been deep under Moria, conceivably. The Watcher in the water thing suggested that to many, plus the fact that you can see what looks like a rock outcropping behind it led people to say, like, is this underground? Is this some kind of deep underwater sea in which the great grandfather of the Watcher in the water lives, basically? And that's what we're seeing here. So there was a lot of doubts. There was a lot of uncertainty. Notice that instead of trying to play into that, the marketing for season 2 has like totally clarified this plot line. So now we know exactly who the person is who's floating in front of the sea worm, who exactly. Anyway, we know that, there's still a lot that we don't know, but we now know entirely the consequences of this. So that's really interesting. Like, again, that's just another piece of evidence to show that the entire approach to marketing season 2 is very, very different than we saw in season 1. Instead of trying to capitalize on, mystery and doubt and uncertainty, they're instead trying to show stories, right? They're telling us what the story is, so that our interest in seeing season 2 is not going to be, will my crazy theory about what's actually happening here turn out to be true? Instead, they're saying, we know what's happening. This is Muriel is being subjected to a trial by ordeal. But of course, there's still a lot of things to wonder, like, how did that happen? What leads up to this? What is the outcome of this situation? There's still a lot to sort of tune in to figure out, but it's a very different, what they're kind of banking on is not just pure uncertainty or pure mystery. They're banking on the narrative itself. Yeah. And I like that.
It's nice to see a little bit more pushed behind the story, and it's not just these action shots that we see in the trailers. Like, these featurettes are way more revealing to me than the trailers of what we're getting, and that's been a lot of fun. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Right, Sarah adds, it's looking more like they're not going to go the Pharazôn snatches power through marriage route. One of the things that was totally clear is that, and this is an adaptation decision I am 100% behind and would have done exactly the same thing, is when Tolkien told this story of Pharazôn and Muriel and Pharazôn's coming to power, Tolkien told the story of our Pharazôn's coming to power, but he told it in literally one sentence in the Akalabeth, right? It's an extremely compressed version of the story.
that he marries her by force and seizes the crown for himself. That sentence, of course, can do nothing to answer the question, how did he manage that? What was Muriel's perspective on this? What were the political circumstances surrounding that seizing of power? How did that happen? How did that go down? Like, the story is so short. This version of the story Tolkien tells is so brief that there's no time to develop that, and obviously no time to develop even our Pharazôn as a character, much less Muriel as a character, right? We don't get any glimpse or insight into Muriel's actual character in Tolkien's writing until the very last moment. Like the fact of her trying to run up the Meneltarma, to plead for Numenor and being caught by the wave is like the only detail that we have that gives us any insight into Muriel's actual personality or character. And even that is kind of up for interpretation. Anyway, the point is, Muriel, in Tolkien's one-sentence treatment of that plot, Muriel is a totally passive object, right? Pharazôn takes her, marries her against her will, and usurps her throne. And there's no indication of what she does, what her perspective is, anything like that. So that they weren't going to make Muriel into a completely passive character, I was pretty confident in. And again, like I said, that's exactly the choice I would have made too. So clearly season 2 is going to be very involved. Is one of the main plot lines of season 2 is going to be our Pharazôn coming to power and the political sort of struggle with Muriel and how all of that happens. He could still, I will be surprised if they alter the text. I bet you they are still going to get married. And that she's probably not going to be super pleased about that situation. Like, I believe that that's still going to happen. But there's obviously more to it. There was obviously more to it than that in Tolkien's story. He just didn't tell the story. That's not the story he was telling, and the mode he was writing.
Didn't fill in that gap, but that's what these guys are doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, but fascinating story nugget. That itself, again, as I've been saying since I got back from Comic-Con, the thing that I am most excited about with what we've seen and what I've heard about season 2 so far is I really like the fact that I'm getting this kind of coherent sense of the narrative strands of this season. I still don't know what they're going to do and how they're all going to work out, but I am really liking being given narrative input there.
Do you feel like, you said it's obviously different. We've seen how it's different, how they're marketing it from 1 to 2. Like, this is definitely a shift in what they're showing us. Do you feel like it's just a shift in what they're showing us, but it's the same? They haven't changed their storylines. They haven't changed the way they're writing this, or do you think they have kind of been reactive to that? And this,
I'm sure they have. It's a little bit hard to say at this point, right?
Yeah, I'm just curious of we're only in part 2 of 5, and we've said that from the very beginning. Yeah. Is it looking more narrative because we now have more narrative, or is it looking more narrative because they're making sure we see more narrative?
Yeah, no, exactly.
I hope the latter. We get more from that.
Right, exactly. No, I mean, I think that we're seeing a shift in the marketing approach is clear. That's manifest. How I think that the change in the marketing and any changes that there may be in the writing or the storylines or characters, I think that those two are probably like independent of each other. But yeah. Anyway, okay. But let's keep going because we're just like ripping through this thing.
Here we go. I'm loving it.
I look a little bit worse for wear. As you can see, I'm having a holiday.
Spiders
everywhere.
Give me your hand.
Help!
We're creating an army of orcs for the end of the season where we have this huge battle with the...
I'm going to say before we get to the orcs and the prosthetics, let's talk about the Shelob sequence that we just got there.
I was gonna say the Never-Ending Story quicksand because that's where I went, or the
lightning sand in the Princess
lightning
Bride.
sand. Thank you. I was like the rodents of unusual sizes. Where were they? Yeah,
Yes.
the lightning sand.
Yes. Yeah. So exactly. Suddenly Isildur becomes Artax. Yeah, I hope not, man. That is still like, I would still put the loss of Artax as in like the top 5, like saddest, most traumatic film moments of my childhood.
Even thinking about it now kind of makes
Yes.
me
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yes.
How they did that to a whole generation of us.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Eric,
that was.
I've never seen it. We should do a watch along of that. Talk about a lovely adaptation.
Yes, it is. It is. It's very moving. Anyway, okay, yeah. So, so I don't exactly know what's going on. The mud sequence doesn't help me understand the narrative. I don't really understand what that is or how that fits. But I wonder. The spider thing is more clear to me. That Shelob lives already in those mountains is just what I would expect, right? That Shelob had children, had many other little spiders, we know for a fact, because that's where the Mirkwood spiders came from. So all of that stuff makes sense. That Isildur and Arondir are together, are exploring this area, I can well understand. So my guess, by the way, with the spiders, we're always seeing, we've only seen Isildur alone being attacked by spiders. So I suspect that what's happening is that, remember, Isildur was left behind because they thought he was dead in the collapsed, burning building in that village where they were when the volcano erupted. So that means that Isildur is going to have to find his way out of Mordor himself. Mm-hmm. So it looks like he's going to find his way out of Mordor by way of Cirith Ungol, which, why not? Okay, I'm ready for that. In fact, I really love the idea of connecting Isildur to Shelob at this stage, because we know that Minas Ithil, the fortress that he is going to build, he is going to choose to build it right next to Shelob's lair. And so the idea that what we're getting is a kind of a backstory there, right? That Isildur and Shelob have a kind of history, and that part of what his fortress perhaps is meant to do is to be like, you know what? There's some serious spidery badness going on in these mountains. I'm going to build my fortress here to make sure that they don't spill out into, these other lands where, like, my brother's building his city and all that kind of thing. Exactly, Eric. So that the tower was meant to watch in both directions. Yeah, exactly. I think that's cool. I'm ready for that angle. But then presumably he's going to have to get to Arondir, who is out by Pelargir and everything. So yeah. Eric, I wonder, does Isildur build the stair? That was one of the things that I've been wondering. Are we going to see the actual building of the stair of Cirith Ungol, maybe even the tower of Cirith Ungol? The one where Frodo gets imprisoned in The Lord of the Rings. Anyway, I think that's going to be, so that connection I think is really fun. And again, I feel like I can begin to see there the sort of the narrative flow of Isildur having to escape and then getting connected with Arondir and Theo with the rest of the human Southlanders there, as now the like proto Gondorians, right, who are going to be there when the combining with the Numenoreans to build what's going to be Gondor. Anyway, so I think that's interesting. The mud monster, don't know. Not sure what's going on with the lightning sand there.
No, but the two of them working together is pretty important. Just seeing that rescue and seeing that threat.
Yes.
That's a pretty big shift, yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Anyway, okay, so let's get to the orcs and the prosthetics.
We're creating an army of orcs for the end of the season where we have this huge battle. With the Rings of Power is the first project where we've taken a dive into 3D scanning performers, so we can 3D print ears, we can 3D print heads. It's an unprecedented amount of prosthetics. We've never made anything on this scale before.
My children, you are free.
Love Adar's horn.
You're going to experience a season that is edgier, darker, more dangerous.
You dream as a kid about having sword fights in the mud against orcs.
This season stepped up these evil beings that Tolkien wrote. You look around and it's essentially real. It's all there. It's incredible.
Send to me. Oh, Father, he will kill our own kind. Send him in.
There's something I find. Hang on, let's stop this now. Something I find so delightful about that image of him picking something up and hitting it with his club in midair. Like it's just there's something
It's
just
very
kind of
human, that,
yes,
isn't it?
even childlike. I mean,
Yeah.
like it reminds me of like 10-year-old me with a baseball.
Right.
You know.
Or like anytime you see something in the road that's within your foot, you're like, well, I'm gonna kick that. Like it just
Right.
it just feels like I have to hit that acorn or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
I really enjoyed this, like they're showing just enough of the clips to show us this is bigger, this is better, which is often the purpose of these featurettes.
Right.
But the bigger, better they're showing us is also adding to the like the narrative, what we were talking about. Having the orcs have those 3D printed prosthetics makes it such a more realistic engagement of that character, because we can see facial expressions underneath that. What's the name of the material that they do that with?
What is it, like latex or?
Yeah, no, the stretchy stuff.
Right.
Like being able to see that and not see the foam shift, an entire side of the face. It's like, no, we get the minute. Then you get that minute actor performance, and we just get to see a lot more. So committing to that for an army of orcs of like 200 orcs, that's going to be pretty epic. We haven't seen anything like that before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, it's neat. It's going to be really interesting. The creature stuff is fun.
Really
it's fun to see. That little, I didn't really.
Silicone. Thank you. Sorry.
Silicone. That's the one. Yeah.
Thank you.
When I looked through this, when I've watched this before, this little sequence, the quick shot creature sequence right
it's
here.
all there. It's incredible.
Here, boom, 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 boom. There's a lot of really interesting moments there. We see multiple sea things, the barrow white, the spider.
And the barrow white, they show us how they made the barrow white. We also get that shot of the actor on the spinny bit acting like the barrow white. I'm doing this because you know what movement I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
And then showing us what it looked like on film. That's really interesting too. Like that kind of takes power away from the barrow white in one way. We're seeing that it's just a trick, but it doesn't really lessen my interest in the barrow white.
Right.
Like,
Though we're also seeing that
cool.
it's not just a computer generated thing. Like there are human actors even playing the barrow whites there.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
No, it is interesting. So yeah, from a BTS standpoint, there's a lot of really interesting touches, things that we, like things about all of the yeah, no, the narrative threads are the part that are just so exciting to me. And I'm really interested. I think that the storylines, all of the storylines that let me see. Sorry, I'm doing that thing that I do when I check to make sure the thing I'm about to say is actually true. Sure. But I think it's true. I think that all of the storylines that they have shown us, like there aren't any of these storylines that really like cause me concern, that I'm feeling like trepidatious about, right? That I'm really like, oh, I don't know, that seems kind of shaky. I find them all really, the Numenor storyline, like Ar-Pharazôn's rise to power. I think that's going to be really interesting. I think Numenor is fascinating. Remember how I said last time it would be like we could have a whole separate discussion about the creation of the Rings of Power sequence, like the order in which they're created and the adaptation show, like what the book order means and implies, what the movie order means and implies, and what that adaptation choice is about. There's a whole discussion we can and probably should have about that. I think another topic for like a whole other conversation is on the adaptation of Numenor and of fan responses to Numenor. Numenor is at the heart of everybody's concerns about time jumps and things, which I and I will say, I have felt that fans have been totally unreasonable about the adaptation of Numenor from the very beginning. Even the things that some people were complaining about last season, again, I don't find it reasonable. I understand it. I can see where it's coming from, but I really don't think it's reasonable. Anyway, but there's a lot there. There's a lot there, and I think it's an interesting it's an interesting example of a phenomenon we've discussed before about like a concept that fans are invested in, right? And then their own investment, their own imaginative and emotional investment in not even a story or a character, but a concept from the book. Then when that gets woven into another adaptation, it's leading to some fairly serious problems. I don't mean problems with the show. I mean problems in people's reactions. I think that many people's reactions to the Numenorean elements have not made a lot of sense because there's been a lot of this kind of emotional response. Anyway, I would love to kind of sit through and work through that a little bit more. Where Numenor, like what people are wishing to see in the rise and fall of Numenor, what the show is actually claiming to do, which I think is quite different from what a lot of people are claiming that they're doing. The way in which the significance of the compression of time, which I have been arguing from the beginning is not a tenth as impactful to the story as a lot of people seem to believe that it is.
I think it's one of the things that people feel can be really jarring. So it always becomes a central point of conversation because everybody feels that jar.
Yeah.
But in terms of actual impact, it's not as much, which we've talked about a lot. So
yeah.
I get why it's so widespread and why people talk about it. But yeah, I agree that it's not as big of a deal as some of this other stuff.
No, I don't think it is. But anyway, but there's a lot there. I mean, yeah. And one of the problems, the biggest problem, I think, has been that Numenor has been about 1/7 of this show so far. You know, it's like maybe one of the 5 major areas, but it's gotten less screen time than most of the rest of them have. So it's not even 20% of the show. Yeah. The Numenor storyline has been closer to 10% than it is.
It's showing us that it exists, but it hasn't had its center stage.
Yeah. Yeah. We've gotten to know the characters of like Elendil and Isildur a little bit, and Eärien to a lesser extent. But really, like what we've seen and learned of Numenor, we spent an entire episode in Numenor, and we still didn't really get to understand it all that well.
Right.
So, Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot that we could. I mean, I would like to do more on that, but let's hear the song. Can we hear the song?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's hear the last ballad of Damrod. As I said, I haven't got a chance to listen to this. This is my first time listening to this. So.
Oh, you're in for a treat.
Here we go. All right, you were alluding to this, the recollections of the opening sequence with the sand. I love it. Can I just say that the singer's elocution is marvelous. It's really good. Love it.
Right.
Okay, so on hearing it, I can see how many people were taken aback. I have to admit that part of my non-shock by it is, well, first of all, I was prepared because the one thing I had heard is that it was heavy metal. And also I will add, we listen to a lot of heavy metal in my household. I have two sons who are both hardcore heavy metal fans. I have been to multiple heavy metal concerts with my sons. Like, I was just like at a mosh pit I was just in a mosh pit at a Blind Guardian concert with my son a couple months back. So like, by heavy metal standards, that is neither very hardcore and quite impressively easy to understand, like the style of lyrics. So there are two basic schools of heavy metal vocalization, right? There is what I call the screaming school and the growling school of heavy metal lyrics. And this is more the growling school. And yet the growling school, normally I can't understand the first word of what they say. My younger son is actually in a heavy metal band, which performs that kind of vocalized music, and I can't understand a single word generally that the lead singer of my son's band is saying when he's performing their songs. My son's the drummer. Yeah, exactly. The drums I can follow, the vocals not so much. Anyway, so like I said, to me, like I this is much closer to a culture I'm familiar with because of my children, which, by the way, is my fault entirely, right? I played them the Blind Guardian Nightfall and Middle Earth album in the car while we were driving to and from school years ago when my younger son Matthias was in like 4th grade and my older son was in 9th grade. And it was directly as a consequence of listening through basically playing Blind Guardian Nightfall and Middle Earth with them while we drove to school for a while. We played it a lot for a while. Had the dual consequences of leading both of them to read the Silmarillion and bringing both of them to become heavy metal fans. So, like, you know.
Yeah, parenting tick.
Exactly. Like in the end, totally a net gain, no matter what else happens. But
well, this also didn't surprise me because of Bear. I mean, he's made it pretty clear that he's a huge fan. So like finding a way to incorporate some of that into this, to match it up with a pretty rough looking troll. That fits. Yeah, that fits.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny. I was just this past weekend, I was just watching season 1 of The Serpent Queen, the Catherine de Medici historical drama on Stars, with music composed by Bear McCreary. In fact, like I was watching the credits and I'm like, whoa, Bear McCreary again. And there was a lot of hard rock music that was part of this. So I was sort of just listening to that. Anyway. Go ahead.
I don't know if you want to show the first like 10-15 seconds of the featurette too, because it shows how this music matches.
Yeah.
Not matches, but is used in the show.
Let's see it.
Let's talk about Damrod. Damrod is a troll and makes a mighty entrance. There are elements in heavy metal music that are undeniably appropriate for this troll. We couldn't help but expand it into a song, like an anthem for this troll. So I brought in my favorite heavy metal drummer, Gene Hoglan.
Because he hasn't met my son.
For this session, we are using Neil Peart's Symbols. He's here in spirit.
The song...
Neil Peart from Rush, of course, the drummer from Rush. My son also a big Rush fan because of. Okay, Neil Peart's Symbols. Wow.
The cue in the show are both being sung by Jens Kidman of the extreme metal band Meshuggah.
I didn't think so much about the lyrics, just focus on putting down the sound on the vocals, like the character, the vibe, and the feel.
He screams the way an expert violinist plays. And we just had a blast.
So good.
And just, it like hit for me that shot of the troll step on the warrior.
Yeah.
You know, like seeing the flail underneath it with that heavy metal rock. You're like, this is what we're going for. Bone crushing. Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the diegetic, diegetic sound, like all that stuff we've talked about, of like bringing that sound into that visual. It's a neat way to like bring some modernism in there. We've got modern metal rock like hitting this tone that's really emotional, kind of hits to the core, but then shows us also the impact of what's being shown in this moment of a troll smashing bones. Like, it's visceral. Yeah, it's really cool.
No, I mean, I know, obviously, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And my own, by the way, my own personal consumption of heavy metal is, you know, I'm not the devoted fan that my sons are. But anyway, it's, I think it works really, really well. I'm not going to launch into like a whole analysis of like heavy metal music and the heavy metal genre. There's a lot there, but just from the metal music that I've listened to and the kinds of things that I've been thinking as I've been, you know, in my own kind of exploration of metal, which I've done again, primarily to like listen to what my kids are listening to and be able to have intelligent conversations with my children about the things they're interested in. But anyway, like I think it's a really, really, I certainly can see where Bear is coming from in saying that this really sort of fit and felt like it fit. It feels to me very much to fit as well. And it's interesting that it's a kind of an anthem of Damrod the Troll himself. Yeah. Anyway, Diamita, I would bet you that we're going to go to credits with this song in at least one episode for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. And Troy, the lyrics, right? I mean, I was totally taking that for granted. Let me not take that for granted. Everybody saw the relationship to Sam's Troll song in there, right? It's a really interesting nod to it. No, Nuncle Tim doesn't make a direct link there, but it's what I kind of love about it as a creative exercise. It's like, let's do a troll song except from the troll's perspective.
Right.
And there are similar patterns. You'll notice, maybe you didn't notice because it can be easy to be distracted or even just overwhelmed by the heavy metalness of it all, right? But the snap and crack, the crack and crunch, all of that on like that was clearly a play on the like, you know, donor boner portions. Even the shape of when you see the lyrics put out in stanzas, you can see that even the shapes of the stanzas are designed not to follow, they don't imitate directly the whole prosody of Sam's Troll song. But there's a very clear echo there. Except again, it's from the troll's perspective, right? Yeah. So it's like and that's another and because the song itself is very clearly from the troll's perspective, that's why I really like the heavy metal. Totally works for me because that feels exactly like the way the troll would sing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, that is really interesting. And the rhythm is so complicated. Okay.
We should bring Matthias in for a chat.
Yeah, exactly. Get some comments on the drum work. I was noticing there wasn't nearly as much of the double pedal involved there. It's a big thing in heavy metal music where they use a double pedal on the bass drum. So that, and you can hear it like. I mean, it's a really, really rapid, really challenging drumming technique to be able to do the double pedal as fast as they do. That was one of the first things I was noticing because I was thinking of my son that there wasn't as much double pedal in there as I would have been looking for. But anyway, yeah, no, I also noticed there was very little guitar. I mean, it's the experience. I mean, there is guitar, obviously, and there's guitar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But the song itself is like you feel the percussion, you feel the drums and the vocals. But the vocals and the drums really dominate it. The guitar is there, but it's very much a kind of accompaniment.
Supportive.
It's not guitar metal, as you often get metal, which is extremely guitar heavy. Yeah, exactly. Christ was all, yeah, exactly. I guess Bear composed that with what a troll of Damrod's mindset would be, that of chaos and mayhem. Yeah, I think it's exactly what it's capturing. It's why it feels really appropriate to me.
It feels like the internal dialogue of a troll. Crash, smash. It's like Hulk smash, you know?
Right,
it's
right.
the same kind of vibe.
Right,
Yeah.
bones crunch. Yes, yeah, exactly. Even the whole like ripping meat off of a dragon bone, like that's like a little troll fantasy there, right? You know, like that's
Foe turns to meat, yeah. Foe turns to meat. Was that the line? Something like that.
Oh, hang on, I got to go back to that line because that was a real. I love, yes, troll turns foe flesh to meat. Love the alliteration.
Yes.
Love because this is a sophisticated alliteration pattern. Right, you know, with the 2, 2, 1, like creating a really interesting alliterative pattern in itself, right? And yet, like in a not only simple but crude series of monosyllables, right? Troll turns foe flesh to meat,
and the to meat, you know, it just feels so punctuated, like
yes,
Yeah.
love it.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's exactly. It's not following an Old English pattern. No, nothing like that. But anyway, yeah. I think that's. I love that they were utilizing that kind of. I mean, I don't normally get the opportunity to talk about the alliterative patterns in heavy metal lyrics because I can't understand heavy metal lyrics almost any of the time. But yes, Mrs. Manrique, it does sound like fee, fi, fo, fum. Yes. Yeah. I do think there is a kind of invocation, certainly with the monosyllables and stuff, right? Yeah. No, that's very cool.
I thought it was pretty cool just to release this too. Like, you know, we've gotten a couple of trailers, we had a few featurettes, they're starting to amp up a little bit, but to drop this song is real different. Like, this is a different kind of style. And one thing, it's heavy metal, so they're going to appeal to a slightly different audience than they have appealed to before. So I imagine that's part of it. Like, you know, let's show that we're cool. Let's release this heavy metal. Like, there is that kind of element of broadening that horizon.
Yes.
But I just think it's a really cool thing to drop. Like, it's an angle that doesn't actually show us much. It's a song that accompanies a troll's entrance.
Yeah.
But the more you dig into it, it does show us quite a bit. It is.
Yeah. No, it does. It does, and that's Troy just kind of encapsulated in the quotation that he just put in his comment for exactly what one of the other things that why this feels really right to me. The whole style of this feels right to me, and that's clap, snap, the black crack, grip, grab, pinch, nab. This is the Goblin Town song, right, from The Hobbit. It's the Orcs song. It's the first Goblin song that we get. And yes, like the whole, not only the kind of mentality that that Tolkien shows, but the way that he embodies that mentality within the sound, within the phonoaesthetics of the lines, right? With the clap, snap, the black crap, grip, grab, pinch, nab. You can hear them doing very, very similar things with this. And to overlay that, or to embody that in turn within the musical context of this particular style of heavy metal, it's perfect. That's exactly right. I now really want to hear like a metal arrangement of the Goblin Town song, right? I mean, yeah, that should totally happen. That should totally happen. The Goblin Town, that really does seem to me to capture the spirit of, I mean, can you think of how good Hammerin' Beat, Yammerin' Bleat would sound in metal lyrics with somebody shouting it like that? That's exactly right.
Cool.
It's perfect. It's perfect. So, I mean, that's the thing that's so interesting to me about heavy metal music, is that in some places they're absolutely leaning into how horrible it sounds, right? Like it's the screaming and the growling and the yelling. It's supposed to be harsh. Like it's supposed to be kind of unsettling in that way. And yet it's not merely noise. I mean, it's one thing, the complexity, the musical complexity of especially with the guitar, and there's so much that is immensely complicated. In general, I would say heavy metal music tends to be, from a musical perspective, far more complicated than like pop songs, for instance. Even though to a lot of people are just like, oh, that's just noise. There is a lot of noise. Like it's the complex interplay between what sounds like chaos and what is actually very intricate music. But yeah,
which is why it fits for a troll coming in to smash it up.
Yeah. No, cool. Really, it's fitting, I think, in a lot of ways. So yeah. Nameless Arcanum, I can believe that. Metal musicians are either virtuosos or the most technically unskilled players you will ever hear. Yes, that can happen. But it's funny, like, my eyes were first opened to this, believe it or not, when my kids were younger, and we used to play a lot of Rock Band on the Wii, like Guitar Hero.
Sure.
There was one thing.
I would say a lot of this was where I first met it as well.
Yeah. This was one of our favorite family activities when my kids were younger, and I was the bass player. Matthias was the drummer. That's how he started drumming. Actually, was drumming in Rock Band, which he started when he was like 6, and then my oldest son Nicholas was our lead guitarist, and. Man, when we like progressed through the game to the point where we started opening the heavy metal songs, and I was just like, holy cow, this is so much. Like it's amazing.
Your brain was exploding with like, wait, I need to do analysis stat.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, there's so much happening here in this song, like musically, lyrically, holy cow. So yeah, that was actually the first time that I really kind of came to see some of this stuff. And I've come to be, to appreciate the richness of it so much more.
I wonder if the troll came first or if the song came first, because it was also nice to see the song over the visual of that troll with the skulls hanging down and all that stuff. It just felt seriously metal,
Yeah, exactly. No, the feel of it certainly fits. It certainly matches with what we see, and you can easily see how that's suggested. What I would love, my only disappointment from this featurette is more on the lyrics. Like, did Bear write the lyrics? Did someone else write the lyrics? How did that collaboration come out? Which came first? Did they, did Bear have the basic idea for the metal music first? And then, were they done independently? How did that?
And were the showrunners involved?
Yeah,
was there,
exactly.
Was
somebody from the writer's room writing the lyrics? Yeah, exactly.
I would imagine Bear would do the lyrics, but you would want to steer from what the purpose of that scene was. You would want to have a takeaway, and if it's death and destruction and no emotion, and I mean that troll doesn't have a lot of strategy. It's just get in there and smash.
Yeah.
Then having that be your takeaway, I would imagine there'd be some sort of development conversation there.
Yep, I agree. Phil says, Kickstarter stretch goal, get Bear onto Rings and Realms to explain all this. What a fascinating suggestion, Phil. I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea.
Maybe a stretch goal we'd consider.
It's on the table. That's on the table. So Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Well, we're actually at the end of our time, and we discussed it all.
We did it.
We did the whole thing.
We did it.
Yeah.
I know.
We did the whole thing.
I saw you guys giving us flack for only being halfway through the feature.
Look at that. See,
look, we did it.
we totally did it.
But you know so much is going to drop in the next week. With only 2 weeks left, they're surely going to be amping up their marketing train.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we will see. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe there will even be another trailer we can talk about next week. So we'll see. We'll reserve next week for what happens next week. Yeah. I'm also, by the way, how likely do you think it is? Like, I'm trying to figure out how much money I would put on the proposition that Warner Brothers is going to drop a trailer for War of the Rohirrim like a day before Rings of Power is dropped.
I feel like a day is too generous. I think we're going to be talking hours.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it'll be within the same 24
like on Thursday the
window.
29th, Warner Brothers is going to drop the trailer for War of the Rohirrim. Yeah. Yeah.
There will be a match.
Yeah, I'm kind of bracing myself for that too, basically, and we'll see.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, exactly. So who knows what there will be to talk about. But if there's not, then maybe we can come back and do some of these other kind of discussions. I'd love to talk through the Numenor thing a little bit more with you to see what you think.
Too. Yeah, there were a lot of interesting thoughts in the comments there that I'd like to unpack a little bit with you.
Yeah. And I'd like to talk about the ring order thing a little bit also. Again, both of the things are, in general, like the kind of the overall subject there is the kind of knee-jerk reaction, the kind of the people responding to, but they changed something, right? But it's different, right? And I would like to, in both of those cases, kind of back up and say, okay, yes, it's different now, but let's talk about not just how it's different, not just why it's different, but let's talk about both things. Do most people that I've heard object, for instance, to the change in the ring construction sequence can't even tell me when I ask them. Here's the question I always start with. I say, why does the original ring order matter? Like, what's the purpose of that? What's the story? Why is that important in Tolkien's world?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to imply that it's not. I'm just saying, what is the important? What's the story there, right?
Yeah.
And now what's the story here? And so that's what I would like to do with both of those, with both the Numenor thing and the ring order thing. I would like to sit down and say, okay, what's the story? What's the original story? What is this new story that they're telling, and how are those two things interacting or working? So
yeah.
Anyway,
good fun.
Yeah. So Anton says, why change it though? Well, that's exactly the question. But see, we can't even answer that question until we look at those other more basic questions. Like, what is exactly being changed? What is the change that has been made? Why does it matter? I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Maybe it matters a lot. Maybe it matters a little. But why does it matter?
Well,
what matters about it? Exactly. These are anyway. So we'll practice. We'll practice talking. We'll sit down and talk about this stuff. Maybe new trailers and stuff will come up, and we'll postpone that conversation again. But heck, maybe we'll even have it in Rings and Realms. Who knows?
Yeah,
but in any case, thanks everybody. So don't forget, check out our Kickstarter. Go to Kickstarter and search for Rings and Realms, and you'll find our season 2 Kickstarter. You can find it. It's linked to on the Signum Studios page and in the comments here. Really appreciate everybody's support and looking forward to an exciting new season of Rings and Realms coming up. All right, and looking forward to next week. So thanks everybody, and
thanks, guys.
Thanks Maggie as always, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.